Hello, hello. Welcome everyone. Welcome to Connect University. I'm Alex. I will be your host for today and also a moderator, meaning basically I'm your voice. So I'll give the questions that you have for our speakers. I will make sure that they make their way towards them. So as you probably seen in the past at Connect University, we did have a lot of, let's call them more technical sessions. In those technical sessions, we approached a lot of important policies that we run at the European Commission or just things which are happening in the digital world which needed our attention because we might develop policies in the future. Now, what we saw is that there was still a need to better communicate them. After we've done all this hard work in creating beautiful policies, or in general, creating and working in complex digital areas, we still haven't figured out completely on how best to make them work and how best to tell that to our audience and how best to continue this feedback loop in communication. So for that manner, we created the session of today, for which we will approach them from three sides. One side will be from us. Evelina and Giuseppe will be the ones who will give you the perspective of how a large communication unit within an extremely large organization, how do they do their job, how do they make sure that we can surpass the curse of knowledge, how we can communicate in an extremely complex environment. Afterwards, Jovita will be the one showing you how you can use storytelling in a digital environment and how even if you have very technical, complex aspects that you want to communicate, how to best deliver them so that's understandable and you can actually connect truly with your audience. And last but not least, at all times in communication, you will start slowly building an audience, which will in turn become a community. Now that community, you want to engage with them. You want to know better who is in that community so that you know better how to actually create and sustain that connection. So on that side, Kasia will be the one giving her perspective, and she will also give us some tips and tricks on how to best nurture this community. So without further ado, I will leave you now with Evelina, our head of unit in the communication unit at the European Commission in DigiConnect. Evelina, please, the floor is yours.
In 1990, Elizabeth Newton earned a PhD in psychology at Stanford. She earned it by studying a very simple game in which she assigned people to one of the two roles, the toppers or the listeners. Now, the toppers received a list of 25 very well-known songs that absolutely anyone knows. Of course, it's happening in the American context, but the songs were Happy Birthday and these kind of things. The tapper needed to pick up the song and tap the rhythm of that song to the listener, who obviously had to guess the song. The songs were played over 120 times, and only 2.5% of the songs were actually guessed in that experiment. So 3 out of 120 times that a song was tapped. Now you will say, okay, well, first of all, what does it have to do with communication? And second of all, how can you earn a PhD on such a game? What is interesting psychologically in that experiment is that once the tappers have tapped the song, they were asked of their prediction, how probable it is that the listener will now guess the song. And they were all saying the average was 50%. And this is what is so interesting. So the tappers were convinced that half of the time the listener will guess. But in 40 times, only once the listener guessed. Why? What was the difference? They both knew the song. Why was it so difficult? Because the tapper had the song in his mind, while the listener was hearing only, the sounds that could be anything. This is the curse of knowledge. This is what happens very often in communication. It happens certainly in institutional communication, where we hear the song, but our audiences don't. And that happens also with expert audiences. Now, imagine what happens with people who are not experts in our topics. And what was very interesting, Elizabeth is describing in her thesis, was the reactions of both the tappers and the listeners. Huge frustrations. The tapper was, how is it possible that they are so idiots? How can't they hear? I mean, this is so, and the curse of knowledge is precisely this. Once once you have heard the song, you cannot unhear it. This is what happens in institutions, but actually, if you think about this, this is what happens every day in all sorts of contexts. I mean, it must happen in couples. It happens with you must be able to think of a situation where you were talking to your husband, you were talking to your son, you were so clear and they still didn't get it. That's the song. That's the curse of knowledge. Now, there are, of course, ways to overcome it. And this is what the profession of a communicator is. So here, maybe, sometimes we all, especially in the times of social media, we all think we are communicators. And this is so easy. I can write, I can talk, I'm a communicator. It's not that easy. It's a little bit more complicated than that. It's really a profession. So this is something that colleagues in my unit do, that communicators all over the place do. There are, of course, you will have heard about the different ways to overcome it. The simplifying of the message, the selecting of the message, keeping in mind who your audience is, knowing the audience, having the credibility to pass the message, to get their attention, and keeping always in mind that your audience, however knowledgeable they may be, they don't hear the song you do. So what are we doing in a communication unit? We, of course, have a lot of institutional type of communication. We have a lot of communication that is addressed to professionals through press. We have communication that is addressed to our stakeholders who have quite a good knowledge of our topics, and we hope that we do pass the message. But the new challenge and more difficult challenge is to arrive to new audiences who are not familiar with our topics, and for whom it is very difficult to understand, especially complicated topics. Now, there are different types of challenges for the institution like the Commission. Besides the topics, which, I mean, we are very lucky because our topics are super interesting. I mean, AI is on the mouth of everyone literally these days. So we don't have a problem with interest most of the time. But what we are struggling with, and I can say that, for example, the difficulty we have even with explaining this to colleagues internally is precisely this. People do not know. Don't take anything for granted. Make your messages really simple and be able to select. That's usually the biggest difficulty we have, because our experts often think that if you communicate only part, that doesn't have value because it's not the full picture. It does have value. It depends, of course, what you want to achieve, but selecting and simplifying and making it maybe funny, maybe unexpected, and last but not least, tell a story. That's something that stays with people. What can we do as an institution to overcome all these difficulties? Because it's really not easy to communicate. Everybody has got great ideas, but then the result is not always what we would like to see. Engaging communities, you will hear from Kasia about this. Storytelling, you will hear from Jovita about this. We are trying to do some things on our social media, and Giuseppe will show you some examples, and he will show you how we turned maybe some situations around. What you need is partners. You need like-minded people who can help you, who have their audiences and who know their audiences and who can help you reach them, who are credible to their audiences. And this is where we have put in place and connect the project, which is called Digital EU Ambassadors. We have monitored in a few member states the landscape. We were looking for people who had similar interests to communicate, who knew our topics, or who had access to audiences that we would like to reach, who speak the local language. It seems like a trivial thing, something you will not read in American books, because obviously they don't have that issue. In Europe we do, and we have to remember that we have 24 languages in the European Union, and that you cannot expect people to know English, so you have to come across to them in their own language, which is precisely also why in DG Connect we put in place a multilingual website for those audiences. But what is really important is you don't ever communicate too much. So the more people you can have, the more communality of messages you can find. It doesn't have to be a message of the European Commission. It can be the message that the most important is not always what you want to communicate. What is often important is what the audiences want and need to hear. And that's also part of our thinking. I will stop here because I could go on and in telling you what we are doing to try to overcome the curse of knowledge and try to overcome the difficulty of reaching out to our audiences. But part of it will be told by by the speakers who will speak after me, and a little part also I would like Giuseppe to show very concrete examples of how we are trying to overcome this difficulty and communicate on technical issues and complicated issues, because what we marry in our DG are two things. One is the complication of the topics. Technology, digital are not the easiest topics, and Jovita will go more in detail into that. And another complication is the fact that we are a public institution, which means that we don't always have a human face, which means that we also have some institutional language and mechanisms, and all this obviously plays a role. Allow me just to say that Jovita, by the way, is our digital EU ambassador, and we are very happy to have her on our side. Giuseppe.
Hello, everyone. Just to complement a bit what Evelina just said, I have here a couple of examples on how we work from social media to the digital ambassadors, the need
today to be more creative, to understand much more the target audience that you want to address with your social media messages, and also the need for us to have today a project like Digital EU Ambassadors. And as Evelina said, Jovita is one of the ambassadors in this pilot project, and I will explain you more in details in a bit. So what we do in communication in DG Connect and social media mainly is to deal with a couple of interesting policies, also hard to communicate, and also very interesting technologies like supercomputers, cybersecurity, semiconductors, so chips, online platforms, connectivity, and initiatives like the Safer Internet Day, the Code Week, Cybersecurity Month, that probably you are much more familiar with. And every day we have on our desk this kind of topics, this kind of policies, this kind of initiatives, and we try every day to translate for the public that we would like to address. This is probably, you know better than me, this is our priority for this mandate of this commission. We have the compass and we have the digital decade, so this is the basis, this is the base where we take information and we try to communicate like on an everyday basis. Where you can find us, where you can find our messages and our products on our social media. So if you don't do, please start following us on Instagram and on Twitter. You can find us with Digital EU. And also lately, since this year, on LinkedIn too. If you search for EU Digital and Tech, you can find us. It's really a great community, and we are building a really great community. Just to give you an example before we go to the Digital EU Ambassadors scheme, is that sometimes we try to change it, to translate in a more digestible way the communication we receive on specific topic or a difficult technical topic. For example, this is I put here two tweets. The first one was done by a very thematic Twitter account. It went really good in terms of performance, but as you can see, they were addressing to tech people. So it is really hard for normal audience to understand this kind of communication. So we translated in a much more digestible way for public user, for normal users. We try to find our angles, and we did something that indeed was performing really, really well. So as you can see, we try to really build something that it's like a pack, like a gift pack. So you have all the elements that make your tweet or your communication interesting for a public audience, for a normal audience. What we usually do also is to use creative elements. These are some of the campaigns we have done in the last years. Also to use experts in a more creative way with videos. This was one of the first videos we did explaining our users what was the trustworthy AI and why it was important to have like ethics in AI. And we did this game with experts. So it was really another way of communicating important things, important priorities for us in a very creative way. And then we also have, for example, this in the middle, it is from an initiative, Laptops for Ukraine, and we asked Ukrainian graphic designer to create something for us, something artistic for us. Then we do memes. We have our colleagues in the social media team that do great jobs in terms of creativity, in terms of finding trends. As you can see, this is a reel, the last one you see in the corner, when we communicated about the Vlops and Vloses joining the DSA. So it was really something technical, and we tried to put it in a much more nice way in terms of style and audiovisual products. And so we did this like group chat with all the different platforms joining the DSA. As you can see, we do creative things with cartoonists, but also in collaboration with other institutions and with the central account, with European Commission central account, we are. The social media team is really focusing on Instagram at the moment, using also stories and reels in a creative way. We have one of our the member of the team really focus on finding creative elements in working on creative content, using stories in a much more creative way, so to make them much more interactive. This is a really cool reel. If you want to see it, it's on our Instagram account. If you go in the reels, you can find this. It's on Wes Anderson trend. It is really good, done by the social media team, and this is why, for example, this is a campaign we have done on the DSA. Also finding creative ideas to communicate on something really important on platforms and digital, using also in influencers. So we have a community of influencers that participate in this campaign. We collaborate with other institutions for important things, but also with representations, sharing contents and doing contents in their language. And then we go to the Digital EU Ambassadors. Digital Ambassadors is a community of tech enthusiasts, nano and micro influencers online, on social media, mainly focused on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. This is a really cool photo we have taken during the EU Open Day this year in Brussels. They are much more 40 ambassadors, and they help us to communicate on different topics. So every month we give them like a briefing on what we are working on, and they decide, it's on a voluntary basis, so they decide if they are interested in, they ask us for more information, more content. They can also have direct contact with our experts, so to understand more the topics, and they produce a lot of content, as you can see, from articles, blogs, stories, video, reels, many things. And also they help us on the spot. So they came with us when we go on the spot to some events or to some. They used to tell and to help us with the storytelling on the spot when we need to present something when there is an event. Today, there are 40. More or less 40 active members from Italy, France, Poland, Romania, Spain, and we are still looking for Sweden and Germany. The idea is that for the next year we open to all the EU member states. For the moment, it's a pilot project, so we are still checking on the project if it's good for us, what we have to adjust, and that's it. Most, as you can see from the chart, the majority is from Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And if you want to know more about the project, but also if you want to know them, you can go on our website, digitalstrategy.ec.europe.eu, and search for Digital EU Ambassadors. So you have all the list of the ambassadors there, and you can know them more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you, Evelina. We do have questions. Just as a small reminder, I will try and keep some of your questions at the end, because they can also be answered by Kasia as well. So it's nice to get more perspectives. I think I will take roughly 2-3 questions now, starting with, let's say, with the more easier one. How do you actually recruit the ambassadors and keep them engaged? And second, if they represent all member states?
So yeah, this is a very interesting question. As Evelina said, we have monitored first 3 countries, Italy, France, and Poland, and we have tried to take tech enthusiasts, but also nano and micro influencers, so under 10K of followers. And as we are at the moment, like measuring the project, it's still important to us to not open to everyone the project, but at some point we will call for other experts. So if you know someone that could be interested and is interesting, you can flag to us. I don't know if you want to compliment.
Alrighty.
Maybe just one thing to add. It is obviously a project where building the community, and I suppose that Kasia will have, that's why maybe I don't go into more details, but we construct a relationship of trust with digital EU ambassadors. These are people we trust, and we hope that they also trust us, which also means that obviously there must be a limit of number. I will not be, telling you a secret if I tell you that that community can be agile and can be a true community, networking with each other, exchanging, because this is what is happening beyond us. Because they are 40, and there is probably some magical number that you cannot exceed if you want to keep a community active. I hope that maybe Kasia will have the magical number. I'm not sure. We are testing it. We are complete, let's say, pioneers in this project. We are learning every day. We had several phases of the project, and voila. And it's a learning process. So. That's it. The ambassadors are recruited on absolutely voluntary basis, but on objective criteria.
Great. A short mention, Evelina did also mention that a while ago about the multilingualism here in the Commission, well, here in Europe as well, in the European Union. And in case you have problems understanding my Eastern European accent, I apologize for that. I'm trying to do things about it. Doesn't always work out, but I try and slow down, especially on your questions. Speaking of hard things to do, we have a question from you for Evelina and Giuseppe. What was the hardest policy to communicate and why?
That's a difficult question. I don't think they are all hard and less hard. There are certainly some topics, maybe I will revert the answer. There are certain topics that are easier to communicate because the interest is already there. So it's certainly AI, cybersecurity, because people feel that they are concerned by this. The most difficult policies in general are those where people don't feel they are concerned. It's not so much about technicalities. I don't think you would expect the answer, it's about quantum or it's about, supercomputing or something super technical. It's not about that. I think that you can explain any technicality in an easy way if you understand it and you want to pass the message. So it's not about technicality. It's more about getting your audience to feel that this is something they can relate to. And in this respect, what is the most difficult from my perspective, but it goes beyond the topics and it's more about institutional communication, it's to communicate legislative process, to communicate things that are important for us as institutions because they make part of the life. And obviously, you don't get to results if you don't have that boring legislative process. On the other hand, the legislative process, while it's ongoing, doesn't mean anything to people. It doesn't change their life, and that's the hardest thing to communicate, I think, because there you need to use a lot of people's imagination and goodwill to make them relate to what is going on. So beyond, I think that that's the limit, and we should probably recognize it as institutional communicators, that there is limited appetite and there are particular audiences who are truly interested in the legislative process and will be excited about your news of a success in a trilogue. And that if you really want to pass with this message, you have to use a storytelling of how whatever has happened today. Let's say that co-legislators have agreed on the final shape of CHIPS Act. That says nothing to people. But if you can explain why this, how this will impact the industries, the normal people once it comes into life, that's something that can be done. But here, of course, the time is your enemy, because then you will have to admit that, okay, yes, it will happen, but it will not happen before in 2 years. And that's where you lost your audience. But that's, objective constraints you have to be aware of.
Thank you indeed. And maybe it does tie up with what you mentioned before with the curse of knowledge. I think both things have the same solution at the core is empathy, and trying to use that into understanding your audience, into make it answering the question, why would you care? What's in it for them? That's really a hard thing to do in all the things that we communicate, legislative processes included. Again, as a short mention, we will take some of your questions as well at the end. And I think now it's a good opportunity to give Jovita Michalska, the founder and CEO of Digital University and as well a digital ambassador, her chance to give you a view on digital storytelling. Please, Jovita.
Thank you so much. First of all, thanks for having me here. And I'd like to say that I'm really, really proud to be part of this amazing community, a group of enthusiasts who encourage each other to really share the knowledge of, broadly speaking, technologies with the, let's say, normal people who are affected by this new world, but not necessarily know a lot about it. So let me share my presentation. I like doing about what I know. And Digital University, these are two organizations. One is an NGO and one is a company. And my role in the organization, in both, is being a CEO, so running the whole company, but also, and I think it's one of the most important of my roles, is to share technology knowledge with people. So my two most common topics are future competences, future of jobs, world, and technology trends. And I'm trying to share as often as possible those worlds with people who are not necessarily aware of them. So, yes. As an NGO at Digital University, let me just shortly say a few words about what we're doing. As an NGO, we work with underprivileged. So we have programs for young women from orphanages. We have program for schools. We teach technology jobs, we teach competences of the future, we teach about hate on the internet, about bullying, how to overcome the obstacles of being a part of the digital world. So that's what we are doing, mostly in Poland. And as a Digital University company, we teach organizations how people can go through the digital transformation process and how to really become a change of it. One more thing, we are also part of Singularity University world, because apart from being a Digital EU ambassador, I'm also ambassador of Singularity University for Poland, which gives me a lot of enormous knowledge from the tech field, from one of the most interesting sources from Silicon Valley. Why really do we need to make technology and data understandable for people? I think there are many reasons, but one or two are the most important. I don't know if you know this interesting guy. It's Kai-Fu Lee. It's one of the biggest global AI experts, and it's important to admit that he's Chinese. And he's for Chinese people, he's like celebrity. He has millions of people watching him on different social media, and he says something which I think is very substantial to understand today, that we do not have the story about AI. We talk a lot about AI. We talk a lot about how it will affect or change our lives. But this story is not fully written yet, because it's not the story just about machines. It is story about machines. It is also story about people. And those people have free will. And those people can make their own choices and can influence this technology. And that is why we need to talk about technology as much as possible to as many people as possible in a simple, understandable way, because we have to have them as a part of this movement. We have to have them as the part of the legislation processes, of pushing these technologies further or stopping them if needed. We need them to be engaged, because this is something that they will be beneficial for them or not. And this is my really very important guru. This is Professor Amy Webb. I think she's today one of the greatest futurologists in the world. She's creating technology trends every year. It's like 600, 700 pages of amazing knowledge, open source. And she says that we have a virus today, additional virus, which is called nowism. And nowism is a virus which means that we think that tomorrow will be exactly as today, which is, and we somehow already understand it, that it's not true. So, and nowism is even more dangerous because it's incubated in uncertainty and fear, which is, there is a lot of it around the topics of new technologies. And the foresight education and understanding what are the new technologies about, what they really mean, and how they really will affect our everyday life is kind of an antidote of this nowism virus. And that is also very important for us who talk about technologies to talk about them, because then we will be able to cure people from this very affected virus. So it is also our task today to have as many people on this train or any train like this, instead of keep leaving them on the platform. So there are, this is probably maglev, which is one of the fastest trains, 600 kilometers per hour. So it can be a little bit inconvenient to sit on the train, but this is at the train when all of the options, possibilities, and all of the technologies are, and all of the job opportunities, and all of the possibilities to, to understand how we should educate our children to prepare them for the world of the future. But many people are still on the platform because it is safe. But on this platform, there will be less and less and less possibilities for everyone, although it is somehow safe. So also why we should talk about technologies in an accessible way, because we want really those people to become a part of the train instead of staying on the platform. Why the storytelling is important. A little bit of history before we talk about future. This is also interesting. Then Professor Yuval Harari is one of the most popular people among those who are interested in technology. Why? He's historian. Humans have told stories since Cro-Magnon era. I don't know if you remember that there was a Cro-Magnon era, and they communicated with others for survival this way. And it is for the reason, because our brain prefers stories over data. We live in the world full of information overload. One of the most important competencies of the future, when I talk about them, is to go out of the information noise and try to make decisions, which is more and more difficult in this difficult world. We are bombarded by information. That is even more important, to really precisely give those informations to the people in a way that they're easily digestible. And of course, the stories engage, because the Wernicke's area, which controls language comprehension, is attracted by the story. Amygdala, which processes emotional response, is attracted by a story. Mirror neurons, which play a role in empathizing with others, also understand the story. So what stories cause in our brain, that they're affected by different parts of our brain, so it is easier digestible, they are understandable, and we know them we just have them in mind for a longer period of time, because pure data, they just come and they quickly go because there are other things bombarding our heads. What are the biggest challenges if we communicate about technology? Because it is a difficult task. For example, tech has a lot of details which are complex, which are very often filled with jargon and technical terms. And if I see on stage people that are devoted to technology, that are huge experts, they very often say things that are completely ununderstandable by the audience. It is very challenging because we rarely have a possibility to talk to similar to us. Very often, if we know the audience, but we should know the audience, if we know the audience and the audience is a little bit less technical than we are, we have to be less technical, and we have to avoid all of these technical terms and jargon, because we easily will not be understood. And remember, everyone has a smartphone today, so there is a huge competition for us on stage because they can be easily affected by something which is on social media, online, and they will stop listening to us. And also, lack of understanding leads to missed opportunities and the resistance to change, which is also one of our important part of what we do. First of all, what is extremely important, keep things simple. We want to be perceived as smart when we talk to others. And believe me, if we speak in a simple way about difficult topics, it doesn't mean that we as speakers are perceived, because I talk to many speakers and that's their challenge very often, that they want to tell a lot about all of these complex ideas about this complex world because they want to be perceived as experts. But what is our main goal? Our main goal is to make people understand what we are talking about and understand how and why this influence their lives, or influence their future, or influence their children, or influence their business. That is the most important role of our speech, not to create us as experts, leaders, or so on. So that is extremely important, not to use words which can be not understandable by others, and also explain all the acronyms, give a bit of the context about the subject, just to really be better understood. So it's very good to define and explain all of the technical terms in a plain language. It is very important to really think about what we are going to say and find analogies and find metaphors, which also help the audience to understand much better what we are talking about. And what is very important, visual aids, infographics, diagrams, this enhance understanding, because we engage not only one sense, but few senses, which makes the message much better understandable. And look, this is a simple example, annotation. So make people to briefly and quickly understand what we are showing them. If we have this chart on the left, they are both not very exceptional. We show some better in the later part of presentation. But on the left, we have to read, we have to take a look, and we do not really understand what is it about. And on the right, we have an annotation which gives us immediately this exact one information we have to read from this chart. And this is a really simple cosmetic change, but gives a lot of additional understanding from the audience. And of course, we are not alone there. Remember, AI is also beneficial for us. So there are a lot of different tools today to help us visual data in an interesting way. And we can create an amazing dashboards, in interactive visualizations. We can show data in a more interesting way. And these are the four I highly recommend, which is Tableau, Chartify, very nice application, Clipfolio, and Looker. Any of them which you like will help you to visualize data in a much, much better way. And so charts like this, obviously we need time to look. Germany or Italy, whatever this, don't especially look at the slides, because the charts, because these are just examples. I don't want to say And I think just how readable it is. And look at this one. How easily understandable is this? How interesting, how attention catching is this one? So if we think about data visualization, let's think about creative way of doing it and using these amazing tools, which I showed you on the slide before. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to all be beautiful or very infographical, because charts like this I do not recommend, because it will take time to really understand what is the difference. How do you feel about doing science? That before it was 19% excited, now it's 38, so you have to read it carefully. But look at this. It seems less attractive, but it's easier to read, because we immediately see that before 40%, so the majority of children were just okay about science, and after the program, whatever program it was, 38%, and we also have annotations here. After program, more children were kind of interest and excited about science. So this kind of charts are easily readable, and they also help us to be a part of our story. This is what we see. I work a lot in the future of education field. I'm at the middle of my book, and this kind of pictures are very often visible at schools. That's how children really, and especially teenagers, look like when they listen to the teachers. And this is something we would like to avoid. Why it is also interesting and important, because information and knowledge can save the world by triggering an emotional response inside every one of us and make it more likely to encourage us to take action. And what we really want as digital EU ambassadors, as people talking about technology, we need everyone to take action, to become involved in the creating our future. Why? Because big tech companies, they create technology which is not necessarily used to make world a better place. No, they just want to earn money on this, but these tools are very powerful. So if normal people start using them, the world can be a better place even faster. So how can we talk about tech and it trigger emotional response and how to make a story? So let me show you one example of my presentation of how I talk about the topic, which is really, on one hand, very important, very emotional and very tricky, which is synthetic biology, CRISPR, and genetics. So usually I start with the question, how many of you understand what CRISPR technology is? And there is usually no positive answer. Almost no one knows what CRISPR is. And this is something that is happening now. And this is something which is extremely important, because this is technology that affects our lives, our bodies, or our families. So it is extremely important to understand what it is. So what I'm usually telling, I'm usually starting with a story. I'm usually asking the audience if they can imagine that they see a chart of their entire lifespan. And that entire lifespan from birth to death is described, and there is described our unique body chemistry and how it evolves. And there are two possibilities. One possibility is that this chart reveals a long, healthy life. So it shows you, and it gives you information that you will be physically and mentally agile until the very end. And does it affect your choice, your choices, your life choices? What choices would you make having this kind of information? Or it can be completely different. Your chart can show a rare genetic disorder resulting in a possible loss of speech, possible loss of memory and cognition. And how would that set of information influence your decisions? And would you even want to know? So having in mind and using your imagination this way, do you think you should know that it is possible? Because part of it is already possible today. This is Dr. Jennifer Doudna. She received a Nobel Prize in 2020 for this technology CRISPR-Cas9. What is interesting about this technology wasn't invented in the lab. It was discovered in a tiny bacteria, which has a very, very interesting protein inside that helped this bacteria cure itself from any challenge, any disease. And what happened? It occurred that this protein can be programmed and can be also injected to any other organism, including humans, and can find our DNA and can find one simple letter among the millions of letters we have in our DNA. And it is very, very interesting because every DNA is completely different. It's a very individual thing. And sometimes there is just one letter in this whole genome that it's wrong or that it's that has some kind of problem. And this letter is responsible sometimes for the very important, very hard genetic disease. And this technology can cure us from this disease. But on the other hand, this is Dr. Joe Ziner, ex-NASA scientist and one of the most famous biohackers in the world. And he says, what, because we didn't invent it in the laboratories, because we found it in nature, why not to share it freely with people? So he started his own, he left NASA and he started his own laboratory at home, and he's selling CRISPR kits, so you can buy them online on his website, and you can experiment with your own body with this technology. So this is a lot, and this is just the beginning of the story. We have two sides of this story. Of course, he's also right in some cases, because he says, why the pharmaceutical companies charge you more than $100,000 per one injection of the curation of genetic diseases which your children, for example, have. And why is it that expensive if they didn't invent it? So this discussion is very complex, but this is even more important for us to understand it. We should know that we can program our biological...
I want to make sure we are mindful of the time, and at the same time, there are questions for you. So I was wondering if you...
I need 3 minutes more. I need 3 minutes more. So I don't know if you know that we have programmed biological system exactly the same as we program computers today. And if we know that we know hardware, because it's an old thing, we know software, but now we can also program our biology, which is called wetware. This is the moment when we have living, enhanced humans, and we have analogs like all of us here. And I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that 1 in 5 Americans have paid private company to sequence their DNA. I also sequenced my DNA. But do we know who owns this data? And do we even understand if it's somehow decided already? So number 1 in the world, owner of the biggest amount of genetic data is Chinese government. So it's very important to have it in mind. And this is the moment we start, first of all, understanding this topic, but also start asking questions about it. Because what if someone makes a synthetic virus that can kill just one person? Because if we know the personal DNA, we can also create a virus that can only kill this one person. We should start asking questions. Who should decide how to engineer living organisms? Should there be limits to this technology? Should we allow parents, of course, if they can afford it, to enhance muscles, IQ, or anything else of their own kids or not? How should decide about it? Who should be the owner of the newborn's genetic data? Would it belong to parents? This seems obvious. But if the parents became divorced, then who? And would the child, for example, have a right to know, I come back to the beginning of my my presentation, if they might, for example, not live to adulthood because of the serious genetic disorder? These are all questions that have to be answered, and we have to also discuss it internally. It is not only people. We have engineered organisms like mosquitoes. Should engineered organisms be released into the wild? and what are the risks that are looming, we can theoretically eradicate malaria, but scientists in Africa are working on it, but scientists in Europe say don't work on the ecosystem because we don't know what can be further implications of it within the next 20 to 30 years. Three things I want you to remember from the presentation. One, that it is obvious that technology accelerates and we are accelerating much faster than we expected. We don't have a ready plan as humanity. Remember that all of the companies, big tech companies, they build technology to maximally increase revenue, not to make world a better place, but we, normal people, have to do it. We can use those tools to make world a better place. And remember that every single choice that we make can make our future better, and we can start today. Thank you very much. And now I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Jovita, indeed. Thank you for reminding us that there are quite a few digital stories that need to be told there. And at the same time, communicating is part of this key into making sure that we will live in a better world tomorrow as well. Do you still have time for questions? Because yeah?
One, two.
Okay, great. Exactly. So keep it short. You mentioned nowism at the beginning of your presentation, and we were wondering what changed for you in communication compared to 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, if it's easier.
What changed in the way I communicate to people?
In communication in general, for you, yes, in your own life, in the way you communicate, in the way you saw maybe communication compared to 5 years ago.
The world is becoming more and more complex. So the more important is the ability to say it in a simple way. And I think it, from the communication perspective, it also affects people much more than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, many people, they didn't understand, and it wasn't that important. I'm happy about the such a huge development of generative AI, and that it was given to people to test, because it grew interest in new technologies tremendously. I even see it on my own social media. My Instagram grew twice from last year, and I was sure always that I'm talking about niche topics. Now this niche becomes bigger and bigger, which is extremely important, but it also gives us the opportunity to communicate to normal people about this world. So it definitely changes. There is more and more interest.
Clearly, niches are becoming larger indeed. And part of the questions which we asked you, the audience, into what is the most common communication issue which you face now in your organization, jargon was part of it. So yes, niche topics make their way into jargon as well, which tends to hinder communication. And part of this answer was also a lack of personal contact. Jovita, do you have any advice into improving personal contact in communication?
I think we should start with our own families and kids, because technology is more and more advanced, and it becomes obvious that we have less personal contact. Yes, I'm a huge fan also with Dr. Rana El-Kalioubi, who is a global pioneer of emotional AI, and she says that technology dehumanizes us, because we usually have conferences, or although I'm today on a normal conference, I will meet people on the panel discussion about how human component is important in digital transformation processes in the organization, and I will be live with people there. But we have more and more conferences and events and meetings like online ones. So I think it's extremely important to also understand that technology dehumanizes us. So it's our task to really work on being human, more human, and also teach our kids, I think, and talk to our families that it's extremely important to keep personal contact, to go and play football outside, not necessarily only in games.
Thank you, Jovita. Asking humans to be more human, indeed, one of the key takeaways.
That's as simple as it is, but it's on the other hand very, very hard.
Clearly. Thank you for everything. And as you also mentioned, it is about people. People form communities, people form niche areas in the digital. And for that, we have for us today Kasia Kowaleska, certified community manager and community building consultant, who will give her advice on how to best nurture and connect with this community. Kasia, please.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I also think that that's the great idea that I'm the last speaking today, because I feel like I will build on what was told by the speakers before. Let me share my screen with you. So maybe a few words about myself to start with. My name is Katarzyna Kowalewska. I am MITA certified community manager and trainer. I worked for 10 years at the communication teams of European Parliament and European Commission. So I'm also glad that I am somehow back to the stage, and I am invited by you. I am also very happy that I can share today a bit of my knowledge and passion for community management and community building, and I feel that I can also respond to some concerns raised by the speakers before. Today, I would like to introduce you, maybe also encourage you and show you how community building can help your personal work, your institutions, your organizations, how you can nurture relationships with your stakeholders, partners, colleagues, something that Ewelina mentioned in the beginning while referring to the community of digital EU ambassadors. First, I will introduce you to the definition of community that I like the most. There are many. Then I will tell you a bit why the community, what can you get out of community. Then I will introduce you to three key questions that you need to answer, clarify yourself within your organization to get you started. Then some next steps, and I will also show you examples of communities technological communities that could serve as a model for you for your own investigations after having this session. So just to start with the community, community is a group of people who come together around a common shared interest, challenge, or goal. What I like I often repeat when I talk to people interested in that topic, I like to talk about the community as a journey from point A to point Z. That's something that we will come back a bit later, but I would like you to think about community as some sort of journey travel. Something that also Ewelina was mentioning in the beginning about the size. That's also the question that I receive very often. Community and social media are sometimes used as the two terms that can be used in exchange, but it's not really the same. Social media goes wide. It's about awareness, while community is about going deep into relations with members, nurturing relationships with members. That's why it's even better if your community is smaller than bigger. Why community? There are a lot of studies about that shows that there is increasing popularity of online communities. I found one of them from 2021, if I'm not mistaken. 76% of internet users claim to participate in an online community. This is related with many different factors. One of them is related to the fact that we are looking for safer spaces to communicate with people. This is related with privacy issues, several scandals related to data privacy and social media platforms. This is also related to the fact that, as other studies shows, unfortunately, we are becoming more and more lonely. That's something that also pandemic accelerated, periods of self-isolation, isolation, lockdowns, and in natural way, we are going online to look for the connections and the belonging with people. So here there are different reasons why people are going choosing online communities. Some I already mentioned. There are also communities of practice where people are looking into skill building, professional developments. Also, brands are more and more interested in community building because it's deepening the awareness. If you are a company that provides product or service, you can also generate valuable feedback that helps you improve this product or service. And also you are building the loyal group of people that you can mobilize at the key moment. So that's only few benefits, few reasons. There are many more. Today, as I said, I would like to talk about 3 questions to get you started. I consider them really fundamental, but sometimes also neglected. And then responding to them, it will really help you to clarify if community is really something for you, or you just want to go for it just because it's on the rise, or find out key important elements that later will guide you on setting up the next steps for your community. So I would like to start with why, the simplest questions that you can ask yourself. And here I like to refer to the Golden Circle model by the Simon Sinek. You probably saw already his TED talk where he explains this model. If not, I really recommend you to watch it because it's very inspiring, not only for organizations, but also in your personal life. So Sinek says that many organizations, they know what they are doing, some know how they are doing this, and very few know why they are doing this. So community organizations that are starting from what and how, most of the time they fail. Like organizations and leader who starts from why, most of the time they manage to inspire people to take action. So this why for your community is essential. As a person, organization, institution, you need to clarify why you want to start the community. It's really important, and you can do this in a very simple way. You can start with what your organization is doing, why it is important. I suggest that you also brainstorm. If you work in a bigger organization, you also brainstorm with colleagues from other departments And then you need to ask yourself, why do you want to engage people in what you are doing? How this will serve your the goal of your organization. Don't limit yourself. Come up with as many answers as possible. Don't limit. Don't limit yourself. And at some point in this process, you will see that there is some motivation coming out, something that arouses your passion, something that is collaborative. In this process, you can actually discover that you may, for instance, gather people around a common cause, or you can bring together people who face similar problem or they are passionate about the same topic as you. You may also see that you want to gather people who want to get better in something or learn something that you are actually maybe an expert in, or you can mobilize them to take action on something, do something together. What is also important is that in this process, you can actually also discover that community is actually not for you. And here, when I work with different organizations and customers, I see that one of the reasons that when I actually suggest that the community is not for you is when fundamental reason when you actually you are not really into as an organization into showing your face, interacting directly with people face to face, sometimes at very personal level. Once you have this clarified, you need to think about your ideal member. Ideal member, it's you can use a term from marketing. It's basically a fictional profile persona that helps you understand your typical member. And if you remember in the beginning, I told you that I define community as a journey. So if you think about community in that way, and then you think about your ideal member, anytime you have a doubt, you need to communicate something to your community, you need to publish some sort of content, or you think about content for the coming weeks, then you need to ask yourself, you can ask yourself, what does this ideal member need right now? How I can help them in this journey from A to Z? How can I help them learn about something? How I can add value and support this ideal member? And now, if you want to create this persona, this ideal member, you can ask very simple questions about name, age, location, job they are doing, education, what they are studying, what is the goal they want to achieve because they participate in your community, why they want to achieve this goal. That's just an example. You can add more. Actually, the more precise you're in defining your ideal member, the better. You can also create more than one profile. Just don't go too far. Don't create many because at the end it will only confuse you. Also, the ideal member, this is not set in stone. You were constantly in the process of community building. You will constantly adjust it, add more data, remove some data. But that's something that is important to have. Having the ideal member idea is also crucial because sometimes as a community builders, we think to build big communities while one key element of community building is understanding that your community is not going to be for everyone. And actually, it shouldn't be for everyone because the wider you go, this spirit of community is actually disappearing somewhere. So having a clear idea of what your community is for is key to also keep you on track and keep you focused on your goal. The third question is the big purpose. Big purpose is actually why people will gather and participate in your community. You can capture this big purpose in basically very short sentence consisting of three elements. So basically, our community, my community, brings together who, your ideal member, who is, as I said, in transition, in journey from A to Z, to the bridge or the activities that people will do together, so that they can achieve the result that community wants. That's, I think, the element that is skipped by community builders the most often, while actually this is something that you should really do before you move to anything else. That's big purpose. It will basically affect everything else that you are doing. For instance, platform you choose or the content plan. And this will also keep you disciplined and keep you disciplined and focused through the ups and downs of community building that they will naturally come. What is also important, something that I would like to warn you from, the big purpose is something that needs to, something that defines what is in community, both for you and for the members of your community. So basically, that's about the community goal, the sweet spot between your organization's goals and your members' goals. Why is that important? Because very often we can see communities that are set up, established, but they quickly fail simply because from the point of view, they are simply very transactional. So organizations, institutions, companies that sponsor them, that animate them, they do this simply for getting benefits for themselves, while the best communities that I see are very often not even in balance between the organization goals and the members' goals, but a bit more for members than the organizations. And that's quite a challenge to tackle, because it's also about your mindset, about the paradigm of your thinking as an organization. When you have these three questions and you basically set up, you know why you want to set up community, you have the picture of your ideal member, you know who you want to have in your community, and you have the big purpose, then you know, and you have basically the North Star that is guiding you for the next steps. So you need to describe how you want the members to interact. Do you want them to interact only online, and how do you want them to discuss, share visual content, or do you also want to move your community to offline interaction, set up in-person events? You need to think about community guidelines, so some sort of rules that regulate the environment, interactions between people, the culture between community members, what behaviors and interactions are welcome, what behaviors are not welcome in the community. You need to prepare also the seed content. So when you launch your community, you know where are you going to host it. You should also have already some content prepared being there, so people don't come to the empty space. You need to also define the key metrics. So how you will define the success of your community, how you will measure this, with what KPIs. Then also choosing the right platform. So just to give you an example, sometimes I am asked randomly by people, do you think that Slack would be the good space for my community, the good platform? I don't know. It depends. So the most often, the most often answer in the community building, also marketing and social media. So just to refer to this example, if you think about the community of practice, so where people learn something together, and over the time, community is also becoming the source of information, source of different materials and resources. Slack might be not a good community platform for you because Slack is more about having conversations and also searching for old content on Slack is not very user friendly. So this is just to give you an idea what factors can define the choice of your platform. Of course, you also need the community management team, and you need to think how you are going to launch and promote your community. And also, I would like to give you here some examples of big, sometimes even global communities related to technology. You may already know some of them. What I also encourage people to do, encourage people and teams who think of starting their own community, it's always good to look for communities that are active in the field that actually you would like to set up your community, join them, observe how they operate, what makes them successful, what makes them fail, because this would be also a lesson for you when you are getting operational and advanced with your community building adventure. So the first community that I would like to talk about is Women in Tech. It's a quite big global community for women who are active in technology. So what you can find there is basically access to different resources, support, because as we know, women also struggle with some obstacles and challenges in the field, different discussions, sharing best practices, tips, also mentoring, access to job listing. Another community is GitHub, so very popular tech community right now. And here you have basically a space where users of GitHub can interact with each other, can learn from each other about using Git, which is an open source project. They can share the insights with basically millions of users across the world. And the last one is Indie Hackers. That's the online tech community, but also resource center for independent IT people, developers who also think about starting their own startups. So here you can find very different content, quite technical, but also you can share and learn from other people who are already working on the startup, or they are even advanced with the business being operational. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for your attention. I hope that I inspired you and gave you some useful tips on where to start, and I'm also open to answer your questions.
Thank you, Kasia. Personally, it was inspiring indeed, and I like that it was also very clear. So I really appreciate that. There are some questions specifically for you, and then I think there are some which we can take as a whole, the 3 speakers still remaining. To begin with, because you did mention in a community which is more, let's say, organized, rule set in community management. Are there any specific rules which you would recommend to be found in all of these guidelines? Like, for sure, you would want to see this?
Yes, that's a very good question. And also community guidelines, it sounds quite easy, but there are some hidden traps there. So if you build your community, you need to be aware that there might be some behaviors and some users that go off the track. So you need to be clear that you have these community guidelines in place. You need to mention there basically what I would put emphasis on in drafting community guidelines. It's to put emphasis on positive behaviors, an environment that you want to build in positive way, and then only mention stuff that is not very welcomed. So, for instance, probably offending each other is or personal attacks is no go for any community. But if you start with what is forbidden or not welcome, you create the environment and impression that you're a bad cap, and we don't want this. Put emphasis on what make people joining the community together. What is your passion about, and then why you are there together. What is the spirit, for instance, that you support each other, that you answer questions, stuff like this, and later stuff that is not welcome or forbidden in the community.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Do you also see, because you mentioned the word transactional, do you see any difference between free communities to the ones people pay for membership? Do you see any nuances in them, in your experience?
Yes, basically, I am a member of myself of some communities that I pay for membership. I think that's nothing bad about this. Community might be also some part of some business model. We see that also with influencers. We see also social media platforms that go a bit into this direction, where you need to pay to have some access to the content from your favorite influencers. What I think it's very important when we discuss about this aspect is that when you want people to pay for the access to community, you really need to provide the real value. So it requires, I think, even more research into the needs of your potential users and ideal members. That's the most important thing. People really need to feel that they get value for the subscription they pay for.
Value is key indeed, especially for the let's say, well, in both cases, but I feel in the more free ones, people really need to have an incentive to be there and to make sure that, hey, this is aligned with what I need at this moment. We also have a question about personas, and we are slowly moving to the questions we can be answered by everyone at the table, maybe. So you mentioned the use of personas. This was also somewhat mentioned before in giving, let's say, maybe a face to a community, giving a face to an organization. Is it safe to use personas to take decisions, as in the end they are still fictional? That's the question that we got.
I think that personas shouldn't be the only source of information that you're getting to take decisions about the community direction that the community goes into or content that you publish, because it's super important that you follow what's going on in the community, what is the mood, what people are discussing, what they are interested in. That's the key. So persona is just one of many sources that is also a living source of information. You need to keep in mind that you constantly adjust it, because your community is not set in stone. It changes over the time. It evolves together with people who participate in it. But I feel that having it in place, it's very important because it really tells you, it's constant reminder, who are you talking to? And it might be fictional, yeah, we give fictional name, fictional maybe location, but it's still some sort of reference when there are ups and downs of community, of your community building, or you feel a bit lost. That's something that you can refer to. But as I said, it's one of many sources to take decisions about your community.
Clearly. You also added, the role as a community manager, which kind of takes me to the first question for everyone at the table. We have raised the question on how to actually raise the credibility we have as communication experts. Here it's been said within the organization, but maybe also beyond.
Okay, I will volunteer for a start, and I don't know if Jovita has already left, right? So, of course, we as institutions, we have our own credibility for being institutions with those who believe it. But I think that one of good ways to increase the credibility, besides the content itself, so bringing data, bringing credible sources, which is already something, is the famous third-party endorsement. So community building is one of the ways, looking for people who can confirm what we say, and not because we pay them, but because they really can. And I think that another way is not to be afraid of confrontation. I am a big fan of going out there and facing people's arguments with open face and with truthful arguments. And I think that what we also cannot be afraid to say is when we get things wrong. To admit that we are not perfect, to admit that things are not perfect, and to explain in a transparent way. I think that what audiences really don't like is the sort of propaganda communication, where you only show the good sides and you try to hide the bad ones. Of course, as a communicator, you will not volunteer the bad sides necessarily, but you should be ready to explain them, and if worse comes to worse, even say you apologize. So I think that a transparent, very honest relationship with your audiences is what builds trust, because nobody is perfect, and institutions have had for a long time, I feel, a tendency to communicate only about the perfect things and sort of ignore everything that maybe was a little bit less perfect. I don't think this is a strategy. I think that people like to be taken seriously and treated with respect and with honesty. So for me, increasing credibility is having a track record of honest relationship with your audience. I don't know if anyone else would like to, for sure.
Kasia, your take on raising credibility for experts?
Yes, actually, I fully agree with what Evelina said. If I can only add something to this, I think that what can also help build credibility to communicators is simply using different opportunities to share your expertise with other colleagues who may also struggle with similar challenges that you may struggle with. So building your image also networking online, sharing your ups and downs, fails and lesson learned. I think that is something that is super important.
Nice. Evelyn also mentioned keeping a balance, and we have a related question about it, more or less. I think it was at the beginning when Evelina mentioned of sometimes having to make things funny in some instances, and the question would be, you have sometimes funny topics, you sometimes have very serious topics that you need to communicate. I assume both of them come from the same place. So the question would be basically, how do you maintain the same tone of voice overall, even though you might have different approaches from time to time? This is what I see. So maybe to rephrase, how do you communicate from the same channel or in the same community, both serious topics and topics which are, let's say, more light, humorous way?
Okay, apologies, I was not getting the question. So first of all, one thing I would like to say is that there are no serious and not serious topics. It's not about the topic. It's about the approach to the topic. You can make, okay, except for some dramatic topics that you wouldn't like to ever make funny, I think that you can make light communication about more or less anything, including what you say, serious topics. I think that the choice of form is determined by the objective and the audience. If your objective is basically to inform, like really deep information, etc., you go to the stakeholders, you wouldn't use a GIF or a memo or something. So certain forms are fit for certain objectives and certain forms are not. Having said that, from our institutional account, as you have seen, we do communicate all sorts of things. So you see our Twitter. Okay, it's true that, for example, Instagram is much more fit, if I may, for light and funny messages and very visual communication, but it's because the audience of Instagram is typically not experts or not necessarily experts, or if these are experts, this is not what they're looking for. So you rarely would use a channel for extremely different forms of communication. The serious, if we are talking about social media, the serious, if you want, is more LinkedIn and Twitter, while you use, so that's why we have different channels, because we use different forms on the different channels. You wouldn't use, okay, we can promote a cartoon video, we have made some, these are lighter, they are funny, we would promote them on Twitter. But there is no easy answer, and of course these channels also evolve. You have to be very cautious of the fact that your audiences evolve, your channels evolve, and last but not least, you never communicate in a vacuum. So the choice of form and of the channel needs also to take that into account. That the moment in which you communicate, and it doesn't have to be a big, background of against Ukrainian war, for example, but it could be a piece of news that is dominating the day on the day. That is something that you also have to be very cautious about, because the message that comes across, it's not important what you want to communicate. What is important is what comes across to your audiences, and your audiences are impacted by the whole environment. So I don't want to underestimate the form, the topic, but it's just one element. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but the answer is more complex than that. It's not so much about form, how do you use that format or that topic, serious or not serious? It's all sorts of elements that as a communicator you need to take into consideration, which is why, coming back to my first point, communication is a profession, because that's not necessarily something that anyone would see. I don't know if, Giuseppe, you want to add something to that?
Kasia, anything you might want to add from a community point of view in terms of having both things at the same?
Actually, I was listening to Evelina and I was thinking that I could comment on from both sides, because for many years I was communicating on social media, first on behalf of European Parliament, then European Commission. And I think, as Evelina said, that's very complex. It has a lot of factors to be taken into account. But every time I was drafting a post or article, I was always thinking like I was communicating to general public, but I was thinking like, if I meet this person that I am writing for, like how I would explain the topic, what I would like the message to be, what message I would like to be seen, what I would like them to get from. And I think that that's crucial if you communicate on behalf of the institution. You can't be institutional. You need to make stuff a bit more personal. And I think while you are community builder, also on behalf of institutional organization, it makes even more complicated, I think, because people where you animate a community that is more private, more, I would say, intimate, people would really expect from you that you behave like another member of this community. So if you keep it official or you keep distance with the people who are members of your community, it is not going to work. You really need to become very, very personal, because that's communities about the relationship with the people who are members of it. I hope it helps a bit.
For sure. And it's been something which has been mentioned today, I think, numerous times, being human, even though if you're an organization, even though if you're a group, being human is definitely key in empathizing with your audience and actually communicating effectively with them. Thank you, Kasia. I think we will just take two more questions, which are addressed towards the more commission side, I would say. One of them relates to our previous topic on humor. An audience member was wondering how were memes received from your audience when you started introducing them in your communication. And the audience member also mentions, I have a hard time convincing my organization to use them.
So we experiment a bit, and we have to say that at least on Instagram and on Twitter, memes, they were performing really, really well. So our audience really welcome, really in a good way, our use of memes. But we also try to don't do any to do like light meme, so don't overdo with creativity with memes. But we have to say that we use not a lot of memes, but when we do, our public really receive them really well in terms of performance and interactions. So we also get a lot of comments and interactions overall. We have started, so we have dropped the idea to Evelina, so and she agreed to test, and so it was quite easy for us.
Thank you. So let's take the last question of the day. I think it ties up to our core topic of being human. And the question would be, if you were to describe the human face, the persona of the commission, how would you actually describe it? let's say if you were to put a human face to the entire commission, would you be able to describe that person in some way?
I admit that I wouldn't even try. I mean, the commission is an institution. It is obviously the challenge, and that's one of the biggest challenges, because you say it's an institution, so it's a logo rather than a face. But you cannot, I wouldn't even attempt to turn an institution into a persona, because the richness of the commission is precisely the fact that it has so many facets and so many topics and so many faces, literally and figuratively. So many people behind it, and so many also aspects. I mean, even if you look at the competences, from legislative to implementation to, I mean, I think it would be counterproductive. I cannot imagine how you would. It's as if you wanted to put a persona to a nation. Of course, then the risk is that you run into prejudice and all sorts of. No, I wouldn't attempt it. To the contrary, what we are trying to do is to put faces. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. If that's not, maybe please write what you meant. But if by what you meant is like in a classical, communication campaign setting up where you are setting persona or personas to whom you communicate, I don't really see either possibility or interest of doing that, because of course you do that in order to be able to communicate to someone, but not in order to, for you as a communicator. So I apologize if I misunderstood the question.
No, I'm sure you addressed it, and for me, it would be also be the same. It would be quite impossible to describe it. For sure, what would be possible for me is to simply add a value, which has been mentioned to that person, which is diversity, and which truly is embodiment of the European Union. The Commission has a lot of diversity, and we see it every day, and we try and use it in everything that we do around here. Now, I hope you at home gained some knowledge into being better digital storytellers, into connecting more with your audience, no matter if you're a small community or a very big organization. I hope it was useful for you today. And last but not least, thank you for all of the speakers. Thank you, Evelina. Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you, Jovita, Kasia. Your insights definitely helped me, so I hope that they helped you as well at home. The recording will be available on the Digital EU YouTube channel, and the slides will be also available on Futurium. Thank you very much, and have a great day ahead.